It's getting dry. Passed my stress tests, a lot of them, but they got knocked over from the big storm we had about 3 weeks ago. And then the deer keep coming in, trampling and eating them, but they're doing along great. This is almost zero input, different varieties. This is just one little mix I had. I started early on. See some deer damage there. As they're going, I got more corn growing. And then I got over here, I have my northern adapted chia doing great. It's all going to seed right now. Let's try to get some flowers on that. That's all northern adapted chia into some sorghum, right? There's that sorghum there. Has some more sorghum over there. And then that right there is all cowpeas. There's my corn. Right here's my corn. And I'll forgive that, it's a little burn pit. But this is all cowpeas, all over Africa. They're all growing, doing great. It's my catch crop after my winter spelt. And so yeah, again, forgive that. That's a little burn pit. But yeah, look at this. This is crazy. Look at all this ragweed, and it just, and the reason I do this is to make my genetics stronger. I have other corn in Illinois, and it completely dominated the whole patch of ragweed. Like there's maybe 5 or 6 plants that survived of ragweed plants. My corn killed the rest of it. And so even though this corn is struggling, and this is not the best example, these genetics are getting stronger, and they're producing cobs. Look how big that cob is. This is just from feeding on organic matter. It's not even, and I get these seeds from people all over, right? They're always treated different ways before I get them, but the deer obviously find it delicious. They're coming through and eating their thing. And so it's just nice having a harvest, having this potential, right? It's just another demonstration that, the deer damage, it's fine. They need to eat too. You know what I mean? It's important to have good stocks, and it's just a good example of, just because you have something that's used to a level of treatment, right? That's used to having these nutrient demands, it doesn't mean you can't adapt it to thrive without it. Yeah, are you going to have, huge yields? Not the first. It's going to take a little bit. Those genetics have to, sorry, I have the little partition here, I have to have a difference, just for, human behavior, right? The whole yard can't be it. And so you have to have a sort of, like these grew with zero input. All these are northern adapted chia, all of it. Huge amounts. And then there's some sorghum there. That's American sorghum, but it's white seeded. And then I have, bam, look at that. That's mung bean right there. Beautiful mung bean, right? I have mung bean all throughout the garden as a nitrogen feeder, right? So you can feed off it. All this beautiful genetics, when people have a variety and they create a variety, right? They're not deleting all the genetics that were there previously. Look at all this. That's all okra right there. Getting okra used to it, This okra's not used to it. Not used to going without nutrients, right? She's getting pampered, All this is winter squash, right? Doesn't look like much now, but man, I tell you, some mornings I come out here and I see those flowers, out in the open, beautiful. The bees buzzing around, the dragonflies trying to get a quick snack real quick, There's one right there. But look, this is my African sorghum right here, grow very little, very, very little, and then bam, look at this. Huge. This is like 2.5 foot tall. It's almost to my waist. These are mung beans. They look at this right here. Bindweed. Look at that bindweed. It formed over it, climbed over it, choked out all my amaranth. I planted mung beans here. right? It killed my amaranth with the grasshoppers. And all this mung just took over and dominated. I have so much mung, and it's so much taller. You know, the genetics are adapting. Even my pole beans are suffering. They got choked out heavy, you know. But the mung beans are phenomenal, you know. And you know, I'm 5'10.5", you know. So, you know, you can just see this height compared to me. Here I am. You know, look how tall these are. Right? They're getting tall. You know, almost 5 foot tall, actually. Well, there you go, 5 foot. You know, just tall, you know. It's not getting much at all nutrients. I maybe did a tiny amount, and I probably shouldn't even done that. You know, I'm just showing you. And look at that, right over there. You know, all those cowpeas, right? They should be done, you know, right before frost. Hopefully those beans will get started. So it's just showing you that you don't have to sit here and grow things. Now, is this not pretty? Yeah, it's not pretty. This isn't your aesthetic Instagram videos. This is, you know, this is messy, you know. but the wild is messy, right? There's a lot of competing plants here, you know. Like that, you know, that would be gone. This would be gone, you know. Airflow would be everywhere, right? But these plants have to overcome. That's the only way to unlock what has been suppressed in their genetics. Something like this is necessary, you know. My spelt, right? It was holeless and onless, and just the starvation of nitrogen it had and nutrients, it triggered ons again on 5% of the population. And so it triggered these traits that were suppressed by human intervention, you know, and it allowed it for a better yield on these varieties that normally are not the varieties, these plants that would have a worse yield. It allowed them to actually produce more. And so it didn't increase the overall yield. It increased the struggling plants. It increased their ability to adapt. You know, hopefully my okra starts producing, because it's about 2 months old and not very tall. But, you know, a lot of people, you don't know how much fertilizer they give these crops. You know, I had a whole bunch of amaranth from Grin. I had high hopes for, and it just, you know, it succumbed to its nutrient demands. You know, it wasn't up for the task of this. You know, you're going to lose a lot of plants. Look at that beautiful, beautiful, right there, beautiful purple. That's corn right there. Yeah, getting a lot of corn, that's for sure. And I'm just so happy with these northern adapted chias. You know, they're surviving on next to nothing, right? Amazing. You know, just when you embrace, well, that's a pretty color right there. Let's look at that. Look at that red right there, that okra, that red stem right there. Beautiful. When you just embrace the plants being wild again, right? You just get the resilient genetics. You know, you're not going to get the yield you want straight out, but when it's time to really need them for a food crop, where you give them the proper nutrients, right? They'll be so willing to accept it, and they will grow so quick. I'm telling you, you know, just this act of wilding your genetics, just this act of forcing your plants to adapt with other root systems. My spelt was so starved. In that patch there, it was all empty. Huge, all the way over there. Huge patch. It killed every perennial plant and consumed it. When we, you know, chopped it all down and let it, there's only a few pieces of Johnson grass that remained. Only a couple, and it was new addition. It was a new addition. It cleared that whole patch. There was nothing. No grass, no plants. I mean, there were seeds in the seed bank, of course, you know. But as far as the perennial plants, they were exterminated and used as food. You're teaching your plants to not need human intervention. You're making them more resilient. And this isn't stuff you have to buy. You don't have to sit here and buy my genetics or get these seeds from me. You can if you want to, you know, but this is something you could do yourself with your existing plants. You might have to buy, a little bit more than you normally do each year. But this right here, the rewilding aspect, the de-domestication aspect, it's possible, it's feasible. It's something that improves the genetics. It allows it to, thrive in areas that plants aren't normally welcome. Our crops are very, very limited on their genetics, on their survivability. That's why we have to kill all other plants and all other insects in the vicinity. And that's not good. It creates a lot of problems. And so doing something like this, this is a little wild, right? But, sometimes you need that diversity, We found all these plants in the wild and we said, we like this and we can benefit from it and we should keep it, Agriculture is one of humanity's greatest achievements. It allowed for pure civilization. Before that, it was just tribal, small little groups. This right here, this is what unlocked civilization. This right here. And there's nothing wrong with a little bit of competition, because as you see, look how well these grew. I never would have, look at this. Look how tiny these are, right? These are all the way down there. But the ones that were forced to adapt, look how huge they are. They're massive. Here's my leg. You can see my knees right there. It's going, this right here is to my hip, almost, right? That's almost at my hip level. That's 2.5 foot tall versus very little competition. It's barely a foot tall. All that, and that's all being encoded in its genetics. All this because it was grown in a more wild and complicated environment. There's more stresses that happened on this. And so it grew and adapted. And that's being coded in its genetics for the next generation, right? Look at that. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Wow, that big old leaf. Look at that. Gorgeous. Out of this world. Look how beautiful that is, right? Amazing. Not yet producing, but that's okay. It's expressing itself. It's got some disease on it, right? That right there, it's fighting it, right? As long as it can produce, that's what matters, as long as it can produce. Because next year, during food shortages, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying if there is next year, it's very easy to get a fertilizer for this, right? It's very easy to amend the soil, and your plants are used to struggle. It's like being used to struggle your entire life. And then finally you get a break out of nowhere and you get this huge, huge blessing. And it just, you're already mentally prepared to know what to do with the nutrients because you spent the time struggling. Just like that mentality, these plants spend year after year struggling, right? And then when you're finally ready, you need to actually depend on them. They're ready to go, and your family's fed, and you're overcoming opposition and overcoming insecurities. And that feeling to know that I'm doing this not for now, right? Not for now, but for a future. And I'm starting now. That's the blessing from this. And so you don't need these fancy genetics. You just need to facilitate a more natural environment where your plants experience less, how do I put this, sterile environments. Let them sit here growing grass and get munched on. Let that happen. That's natural. Let them, let them, right? We're doing this for therapy. We're doing this for seeds. We're doing this for progress, right? Growing grains and legumes at home will not be cheaper than the grocery store. Unless, you can do it like this, then it will. But I'm just saying, it's not going to be cheaper. You're not going to save that money, right? And some people might get upset about that, but that's the truth. I can get organic beans for $2.50 a pound, right? For $2, and that's 1 pound. This is not for food. This is for genetics. This is for the future. This is for a time where I have to rely on food. I know my genetic supply is strong enough to be able to survive this, to be able to grow in this environment, right? And it starts with something like this. Seeing all that ragweed, right? Horrible, right? Killed so much of my corn. But the next generation is going to be so much more stronger. It's going to be so much more resilient. It's going to allow for progression, which is what this is about. This is not about for this year, right? What did you get out of this year's garden? No, this is about next year's security, in the year after that, in the year after that, knowing that I can take to a yard these seeds and they will overcome the turf grass. They will overcome the Johnson grass. They will overcome the ragweed. They will overcome these things, right? And they will be on top. Because if your plants cannot survive, if they can't survive, right, then they're not going to give you food. I'd rather have a little bit of food, right, and my plants survive than have amazing plants that die to the smallest little bit of competition, right? You know, they say corn hates competition. You know, I mean, all that corn, it's fighting pretty well. That corn struggled a bit, but I have corn in other states that dominated in the root system, right? Anything can adapt. Sorry, forgive that. It's a little burn bit. Anything can adapt if you give it a chance. You might have to get a little bit of variety of genetics. I'm not saying that, you know, and not everything's equal, right? And that shows with my corn. Some corn made it. Some corn struggled. You know, that corn right there struggled, right? But the corn over there, the corn here, made it. You know, this is a more northern variety. This is a more desert variety. The corn back here all died. And it belongs to both. And so, you know, there's just pros and cons to everything. And also what works in my environment may not work for yours. You know, I live in Kansas City and we had a whole lot of rain. And so because there's a whole lot of rain, we have a whole lot of vegetative growth, a whole lot of grasshoppers, thousands, it felt like, you know, craziness. And so that's what I'm trying to show, that you can take the steps now for the future. You don't have to have fancy things. You don't need it. You don't need the latest and greatest genetics. You don't need the ancient rare land races, right? I mean, the genetics help. It gives you a head start. But you can use what you have now, what you've been growing now, in order to produce something great, right? I mean, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal just thinking about it, that next year that I plant that corn, it's going to be stronger and less of it's going to die. It's going to be better at fighting in the roots. It's going to be better with its symbiotic relationship with bacteria and the enzymes it produces to turn organic matter into nitrogen, right? It's going to be stronger. It's going to have better root system, because the ones that really got knocked over from the storm, they were denied the ability to procreate. The ones that just got, you know, like this one here, got bent, right? This one, what a magnificent piece. You know, that's at least a 6-inch, a cob right there, you know. That one's getting there. It's getting close. But this is the beauty of it, right? And like doing this, you have to be forgiving, right? You know, I mean, ones that are on the ground like this probably won't really collect from, you know, unless it's a really nice cob, right? But at the same time, I have to be forgiving. This stuff right here, it's hard, right? This corn is not used to it, right? It's not used to it. It's rough on it, you know. I'm really putting it through its paces. And so I'm not going to be as selective of it this year, right? Even though I do have other corn that does a lot better job and that had very little problems, right? Think about this whole patch right here. You know, you had this much ragweed out of the entire patch, you know, because it's better genetics in certain area, has a better root system. It's better at low nitrogen applications. And so by doing stuff like this, I can take a great variety. This variety is very early variety. Starts out in really cold weather. I mean, it's August 3rd, and I've already had one small harvest inside, and I'm waiting on basically the catch corn that's being, grown. There's another cob right there. Again, I'm not gonna be too picky about them, right? The fact that they survive this long under these conditions means they're valuable, And yes, it's not enough food to eat off of. That's not the point. If you're growing for food, right, then grow for food as you would normally, and do a small patch of this. Make sure you have enough corn that you're not bottlenecking, but do a small patch of this. This is a second. This is all corn right here. I mean, Johnson grass in between it also, but you can almost tell the corn. Bam, little tiny, right? And that's fine. You have to let the roots feel. People have grown corn without competition for so long. But if you look at what the Hidatsa Indians said in the book of agriculture, Buffalo Bird Woman, they didn't sit here and use fertilizer, They didn't. Well, you could argue that their yield was less, and I would agree with that, right? But their crops are more resilient, They're way more resilient. And so it grows in conditions that would baffle a lot of people today. I mean, just the genetic lines from those crops people use in their breeding projects nowadays, many corn breeders. And so, we can sit here and ignore the past and how they did to create these resilient lines. But the problem is our food system's becoming inbred. It's becoming destroyed, right? And I'm showing this, right, to show everyone that you don't need a big fancy system. You don't need that Instagram garden. This is sloppy. This is messy, right? But this is reality. We did not have these big fancy Instagram gardens and all this stuff. I mean, that's nice. It's beautiful. It's aesthetically pleasing. But then it's like, what are you doing? Chasing the aesthetics, or are you chasing the practicality? And this is a much more practical driven approach when it comes to rewilding genetics. I'm sure there's more optimal systems out there, and with time I'll become more efficient with it. But as far as getting people familiar with this mindset, this is what I want to show. And what sucks right now is we're August 3rd. It feels great outside, but we've had 60-degree nights. So not only has this corn over here experienced, almost 100-degree days, but it's finishing up with the 60-degree nights. It went from super cold to super hot to super cold, So I'm truly embracing the full genetic capabilities of what's being grown here, and it's just going to create more resilient plants for next year. And so you remember, it's nice to have an aesthetic garden, but those genuinely cost a lot more money than what I'm willing to spend on them right now, And also, what kind of plants are you growing? Are you feeding them the best fertilizers you can get? I mean, are you building for food production, or are you building for longevity? That's the way I see it. I mean, if I grew everything on Miracle Grow, right, it will get used to that. Genetically, it will. And it'll expect it with every generation, right? But by doing this, I'm shaking up that foundation, creating a blank slate, rewilding the genetics. I call it de-domesticating. I'm taking domestication and reversing it. And I'm creating, look at my little beans here. Little beans, you know what I mean? Planted the same as the cowpeas. Little beans right here. Trying to sit here and get them to see for a catch crop, right? I mean, I'm building a system to where nonstop, after this is done, guess what? I'm planting winter peas all through here. Winter spelt, winter camelina, right? Different brassicas that can overwinter, right? I am nonstop utilizing my land. Oh, that can create burnout. Yes, it can. But also at the same time, I'm also allowing for breaks between crops. I'm allowing for not wild, some, I mean, I'm not going to call them weeds. They're undesirable crops, right? Undesirable plants, I'm allowing them to still grow. Because every year they grow, and they're naturalized to this little land I'm on, and I want it to show its expression, Does that mess with my crops? Yes. But when it comes time to when I actually have to weed, when I actually have to do things to make a harvest for food, right? Then my crops are ready for, actually over ready, over prepared really for that situation. And that's what it's about. It's about getting ready for potential problems in the future. We can't control life, we just experience it. And by doing the little things like this, right? I personally am preparing myself for the future, right? Every time I do something like this, yes, I could have more seed if I pulled all that ragweed, but man, I'll have just enough seed to plant next year, just as diverse, right? And ready to go. So that way, when it's time to plant for some actual food growth, right? For food production, to feed me, my dogs, my family, right? Feed my church, right? And whatever group I'm a part of, and, who fuels and feels right in my life, right? Whoever I brush up against, right? I'll have genetics that are a little bit more capable. And then think about your neighbors, right? Think about people that haven't prepared for this, that might need crops, right? You can hand people in your community something that is adapted to literally their yards. So it's less about everyone trying to rush and get their yards ready for food production. That's probably the most important aspect. That if there is a situation in the future where people are scrambling to start growing their own food supply, having genetics like this that's already adapted to growing in, the native crops, or not crops, but native plants, right? It's a fine line, right? You got to watch terminology. But the native plants that normally grow, right? Your crops are already adapted to them, right? Let's look at that little bit of damage. Just happens. It's already adapted, right? And so every generation is going to be more resilient. And by always having something growing in the ground, right? Having that winter crop and summer crop, right? And going in between them, you always have food that's coming in, right? You always have something coming in. And so it doesn't matter what time it is, whether it's a fall harvest or a late spring, early summer harvest, there's always something to share, always something to give, always something to sow. And you're actively participating. You're not waiting for the season to start. The season never ends. And by doing so, you're mimicking the beauty of life. That we're not just a summertime community, a summertime species. We exist in all facets, all seasons, all capabilities. And what we grow can show that. And so, sorry, this is not an Instagram level garden, right? This is a last second desperation to herald these genetics, and to sit here and say, while I at least have these genetics in my hand, and I am stewarding these plants, right? I'm going to make sure that whoever gets them next, be it my future self, family, friends, church members, people I never meet or even have a chance to talk to, but a mere hello, that whenever they get these genetics, they can have, look at those beans, so beautiful, outgrowing, trying to grasp. You can see all those beans trying to live. Whoever touches this, these genetics after it leaves my hands, could potentially have a stronger set of core genetics and expression than how I got them. And that's the whole point, is you're passing along something that is trialed and is ready for brutality, right? Because by doing this, you are conditioning them that life is going to be hard, and that's okay, as long as you find a way to overcome it. And that's what this is. It's my food system overcoming the harsh realities of, you're never going to have a freshly tilled plot of land. You're never going to have the proper amount of fertilizer. You're never gonna have enough sun. You're never gonna have enough root space. You're never gonna have these perfect things, right? I mean, as we see here, look, some things are sad, right? But others are thriving. Everything has at least a chance to express itself. And some things express itself really well and produce giant, it's hard to see. You can see a lot of beans through there and stuff. You can see that these express themselves in a manner that shows you that if they are ready for these conditions, they will produce massive seed heads, right? Or if they're not, they'll have small little ones and they'll struggle, right? I mean, that's worth saving as much as you can, because a lot of times, you know, if these crops have been silver spooned, right, and they've had this beautiful, man, look how big that is. Look at that. Wow, that's amazing. You know, a lot of these crops, if they've been babied for generations, right, it's going to be really hard to break them. It's going to be a really big shock. So don't be too quick to judge them, you know, right? The parentage may have been, you know, silver spooned, but there may be some resilience. And don't be afraid to get some big old bags of commercial crops, right? And, you know, there's nothing wrong with that, right? A lot of the traits are hidden, right? They're hidden. And all you're doing is facilitating the environment for it to express itself naturally. I'm not giving it anything for it to do this. The expression, the traits that my plants exhibit, I'm not giving them anything. There's no fertilizer, there's no, I'm doing nothing but keeping stuff from them. I'm making them find their own food like they would in the wild. I'm forcing them to compete for resources. I'm forcing them to compete for root space. And, you know, like my spelt, this whole patch here, right? Everything dead from spelt. It was starving so much it consumed and killed everything. You know, when I planted all, I mean, so you can see, I mean, like, look, there is nothing in that patch but cowpeas. You know, it'll find a way. It's gonna eat, it has to. And so, you know, you're almost transforming your yard into the garden, using the plants so that just like through here, right? Yeah, there's stuff that popped up and everything. There's Johnson grass, but this huge thing last year, the corn just sapped so much of it here. I mean, all this greenery here, most of it's my chia. You know, it's like right here, this all right here is chia. You got a little break right here, you know, small little plants. I mean, like, yeah, you got the grass popping up, but, you know, that's what I'm saying. The plants will transform the environment to fit their needs. You know, it's less about controlling the environment. It's more about allowing the plants a chance to express themselves. And that's where you really see progress at. And so I make this video not to sit here and say, oh, you have to buy this in order to, you know, to create the conditions for, you know, the rewilding or this or that, right? You don't have to. You can take, the whole point of me showing this is that, look, these are not special genetics. I mean, some of it is, right? I'm not going to lie. Some of it is stuff that I've intentionally sought out or I've crafted, like my cowpea blend. You can't buy that. You know, I blended that myself with cowpeas all over Africa, right? You're not going to just go buy that. You know, my northern adaptation, you can find, if you know where to look, you can find it, right? You know, my sorghum varieties, if you know where to look, you can find it. My corn varieties, you know, I blend my stuff from all over. It's crafted, right? And so you can get it if you know where to go. It's not just like you go to Burpee Seeds or whatever and buy it, right? I mean, that's what it was for my winter squash, because I got Butterbush, right? And so, because I wanted the most compact variety, but the thing is, it's a little inbred, you know, for what my standards are. And so, you know, I'll mix that with other compact. I just don't want the long trailing vines, because in a situation like this, they're so nutrient dependent that they will go a long time and they will delay making female flowers because they're starving really bad and seeking the nutrients. But these are a lot better. The butterbush, they did a lot better than the other varieties I grew. I almost feel like I'll have a actual harvest this year of butternut squash, albeit a small harvest, but way better than last year, right? And so you could see the flowers. So, you know, that okra, I'm just hoping that, I mean, it's 2 months old. That's 2 months of growth, right? Some people's okra is like huge, right? But I'm seeing it almost day by day. It's getting bigger, right? Almost day. Look how big that is. Oh man, I'm holding out. Maybe it might be a month, maybe September when I get okra, but I'm hoping I get okra, right? Because, you know, it's just that's all you can do. I lose so many plants. I lose so much. You're gonna lose a lot of genetics. You're gonna lose a lot of stuff, right? And so you just, and especially when you want to save plants and they're just dying and you have to let it happen, you know, it hurts. However, it's necessary and it's needed, because it's that intervention and control aspect is what is putting us on the path of our food system becoming extinct. And that's a reality. And a lot of people want to argue against it, but I mean, if it wasn't, then we wouldn't have to murder everything just to grow some corn or beans, right? I mean, my beans will grow, right? They're not the strongest, but I mean, look at those. Those mung beans are great, dude. Dang, man. Oh, amazing. They're only 2 months old too, right? They're a long day variety, so they're probably, you know, probably about a month from now, they'll sit here and do their thing. But man, they're just so tall. Wow, every time I look out here at them, I'm like, geez, because they're like, I mean, there you go. Can you see that? Can you see that context? You know, look how big those are. Look right there, you know, for some beans, dude, that's pretty good. And so, you know, once they go to seed, I'll have, again, I'm 5'10", you know, 2 inches from 6 foot. You know, on the websites I tell them I'm 5'11", though, so I tell no one. But, you know, I'm just saying there's these beans, man, I hope they do better, the pole beans. You know, look how big that, right there, wild lettuce, you know, it's great. Those are rare cowpeas right there from Italy. You know, just trying to mix them together. So anyways, everyone, love you guys, and just want you to understand that, you know, there's a lot of marketing buzz out there for diverse genetics and land races and heirlooms, and I just want to show you that really the big three that I've found out that are the most inbred, right, as far as food system we have, is our three biggest grown ones, which is our wheat, our soybeans, and our corn, right? So those I would suggest choosing, you know, land race varieties or blending heirlooms, right? I would recommend that. But when it comes to like most crops, I would say just grab a commercial variety, right? It doesn't matter. You don't need these fancy rare stuff. I mean, it's good to add genetics, right? Like I might grab some from people to increase my genetic stock, you know, for sure, right? And oh man, these are so tall. And these are grain varieties. They're not going to produce that, you know, that's not a syrup stock either. This is going to be a big boy grain, you know, it's going to be a big old panel. And so what I'm saying is, you know, yeah, I mean, I'm down to sell and trade seeds, right? But you don't need to have my genetics, right? And then my genetics are localized to my area. We had 5.5 inches of rain in Kansas City, right? A few weeks ago, in 24 hours. It was crazy, right? Some people get that in one grow season, right? So my stuff won't grow everywhere, right? It's being adapted to my environment. And that's the thing. It's about adaptation. It's about taking something and localizing it, right? And yes, by getting varieties from all over, it increases the chance. But the thing is, doing it like this, you're going to lose a lot. Like I planted pounds, right? You know, I planted pounds. I mean, that right there, all that okra right there you see, that little okra right there, that's like maybe 8 ounces of okra, right? And that's what survived. That's what grew, right? And so that's a whole pound of chia right there, You know, that you can plant a whole acre on that, but instead it planted this. And so you're going to go through a lot of seed, you know, but you're refining it, you know. This is refining, right? You're using the wild to sharpen your crops. That's the point. You're using the wild to sharpen your crops, right? It's so much better. There's no amount of nutrients or minerals or anything I can give it to produce this effect. This is something you just have to do if you value it, you know. I mean, if you're on a little farm and you have access to lots of manure and, you know what I mean, stuff like that, I mean, this may not be as practical for you. But if you're in more of an urban area and the chances of your land that you're planting in is probably grass or field or pasture, right? I mean, pasture kind of takes away from urban, but if you're dealing with this beautiful curly dock, which is edible, look at this. I almost don't even want to grow, you know, collard greens. I can just grow that. Look at this beautiful thing. Look at all this food right here. Just boil it and get rid of the oxalic acid. You know, knowing our food source is so important too, and what is edible, right? Things that are just growing from. I love the covers. Feel like I'm in the Garden of Eden with all this vegetation around, just kind of own little area, you know. I come out here and peruse and walk through, and, you know, maybe I'll do that. I'll walk up a little close. This is going to be a long video, but, you know, it is what it is. You know, the people who sit through it will pull from it. It'll resonate, you know. I'm making this not for me right now. I'm making this for the people who thirst and yearn for it, right? Who want to see how it's done, who want to see how it's so important for our food system. Oh man, ugh. I planted Molokia here, never sprouted. It's okay. Oh man, I love curly dock. That's so vigorous. It's just everywhere. It's just food everywhere. Wow, look at this. It's about a foot tall. Yeah, it's about a foot. Man, look at that. Bam, look at that. Whew, amazing. Just throw it. Just whoosh. Chicken feed. Chicken feed. Chicken feed. That's all I did. Chicken feed. You can tell, look, that's one throw pattern. That's another. You can see the arcs. Whoosh, see? You could see the arc of where I throw it, how I cast it, right? Is it super optimal? No, heck no. Do I have to like start at the edge and go in? Yeah, am I telling everyone to do this? No. You know, I plan on, when I'm doing this, when I do this, I'm going to do more rows, right? And that's the secret. If you've lasted this far in the video, I'm telling you right now, I'm going to do rows so I can mow in between it, right? Just one little mow strip separating in two big rows, probably 5 foot wide, 20 foot long rows, and I'm going to alternate so I can rotate everything, right? It's so important to have that ability because, you know, even though everything is dead here, it was like that grasshopper patch, which is fine. You know, bug pressure is important. Your plants need to feel bug pressure. They need to feel it, and it helps birds. Birds have something to eat, right? I mean, it's so important. We've disconnected with nature, trying to contain it and destroyed it. Yeah, it's bad. It's horrible. So I'll show you guys this because I love you, and I want you guys to have something stronger. You know, you don't have to go to this extent. You can just, you know, you can have your little rows, and you can just not pick all the grass. You can, you know, maybe pick a couple of the larger weeds, right? You don't have to go to that extent. Look at that big sucker. Huge, right? Huge. But my corn's right there, right? It can work. I mean, if I showed you guys Illinois, it's the opposite. It's a tiny little bit of ragweed and all corn. Oh man, genetics play a part. That corn in Illinois was bred for low input systems. That's what this is. This corn is not bred for that. I am allowing it to express itself in that format. And by doing so, it'll be stronger, but it's not quite ready. So you're seeing the messy parts. But when you see that harvest in Illinois, and I'll show it, you can see the magnitude of what the potential looks like. I mean, you already do. You see all that chia. You see all this here. All this is all cowpeas from Nigeria, 3 varieties, Kenya, a commercial variety from America, and then also genetics from plot feed for deer plots. All of that mixed together, giving the pollinators food and allowing them to intermix their genetics from Pan Africa all the way to America, right, in the South, and even stuff that's grown everywhere, you know, commercially for food, right? And just allowing those to express themselves and to grow, and it's beautiful, right? This form of expression. I mean, we found these things in nature, and we said, I like you, I resonate. I'm gonna grab you and take you and bring you close to me. And I'm gonna walk alongside you generation after generation. And that's how we came across this food source we have now. It's that symbiotic relationship, right? And then we've destroyed that sacredness and turned it into an enslavement of a species, for real. And you know, that may be a harsh way to say it, and people may get upset by it, but we took something that we lived with and we relied on for food, and now we're exploiting it and inbreeding it, and just like our whole food system. It's horrible, you know. My background's on culinary first, and so, you know, I'm very familiar with our food system. And so having something like this is important, you know, that connection, allowing to see it express itself in a format that is void in most food systems. You don't see this kind of connection, you know, in our traditional agriculture here in America. You know, we don't see it. We'll see it in the deer plots, right? You know, but those are for different reasons, you know, which I enjoy, right? You know, I don't hunt, but I enjoy the thought of feeding animals, and you know, and yes, it is for game, but still, I think we should do more work in just feeding animals. I think we've destroyed so many habitats as a species that by giving food, that's why I'm nervous, right, when the deer eat my corn, but because I have such little of it. But it's like, it's necessary. They need to eat too, right? They need to eat too. Everything needs to eat. The bugs need to eat. The mosquitoes are eating me right now. I have been this whole video, right, even before this video, right? And so this is my way of quiet rebellion. This is my way of, you know, going against the system by saying that, hey, this may not be perfect now, but give it a few years and I'll have something really nice here. You know, I'm not trying to control the plants. I'm just allowing them to express themselves in its natural most state in nature, surrounded by other plants. And I think that's the key. I think that's what everyone's missing. It's all right. I love you guys. Take care. Thank you to those who watched this whole video. You know, listen to me ramble for 50 minutes about my plant ethics and how I view the relationship between humans and the plants that have heralded us. And you know, humanity was hunter-gatherers until we domesticated crops first. It wasn't domesticated animals. It was we first domesticated crops, and that allowed for civilization in its truest sense, I feel. Not community. That's deep. That's deep, but civilization allowed for the progression of it. And so, farewell.